Welcome back for another deep dive. This time we're really diving into some serious stuff with these allegations against Sean Diddy Combs.
Yeah.
We've got this breaking news piece from the Daily Mail, and the title is something else. Diddy pimped me out as Trump and A-listers partied. Dancer.
Wow.
So yeah, get ready because it's going to be a lot to unpack, right? We're talking accusations of parties, powerful people, and potentially illegal activities.
Right. And what's really important to keep in mind here is that it's not just a celebrity story.
Yeah.
It all ties into these other legal issues Diddy's dealing with right now,
Yeah.
which just adds a whole other layer to everything.
Exactly. It's like, where do we even begin? It's not just one party. This allegedly went on for years. Thankfully, we've got our expert here to guide us through all the details and what they could all mean.
Absolutely. Happy to help break it down.
So let's jump right into the heart of it all. We've got a former go-go dancer. Her name is Adria Sheri English, and she's suing Diddy.
Okay.
She claims that basically he pressured her into being some kind of high-class escort at his parties.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, pushing her into sexual situations with all these high-profile guests he had there. And get this, she says he even secretly recorded these encounters.
See, that's where things get really complicated legally. I mean, these events she's talking about, they supposedly happened way back in the early 2000s. So that raises the question of what legal grounds she actually has to sue now after all this time.
It makes you wonder what kind of parties we're actually talking about here.
Right. Well, the article describes them as being really lavish events, in the Hamptons in Miami. And this allegedly went on for 5 years. She says she started out as a dancer, but then things took a turn.
Okay, so who are we talking about here? Who is she accusing?
Well, she named some big names, like Donald Trump.
Wow, and remember, this is before he was president.
Exactly. And it's not just him. She also names Diana Ross, Paris Hilton, Ja Rule, Buster Rhymes, even Reverend Al Sharpton. It's quite the list.
Wow, hold on. Is she saying that everyone at these parties was involved?
That's an important point to clarify. English is only directly accusing Diddy of misconduct, not the other people who were there. But it's important to remember, even being associated with these kinds of allegations, whether they're true or not, can really damage someone's reputation.
Which is why it's important to mention that Diddy denies all of these allegations. And this isn't his first run-in with the law either. He's got those other sex trafficking charges and lawsuits from other people, which makes this whole thing even more complicated.
Absolutely. And this is where understanding the context is so important, right?
Yeah.
We need to think about Diddy's status back then. Was it common for these kinds of celebrities to be at his events?
Yeah. I mean, this is someone who was super connected in the music industry.
Yeah.
Known for that lavish lifestyle, those connections.
Exactly. So while these accusations are serious, and they need to be taken seriously, this whole situation raises these bigger questions about power dynamics, potentially exploitation, especially in the world of entertainment.
Yeah, you see that a lot in those kinds of situations, unfortunately, where people in positions of power might use their influence for their own personal gain.
For sure. So while what English is alleging is a big deal, this also makes us look at the larger picture.
And speaking of the bigger picture, how often do these kinds of accusations come up, especially in the music industry?
That's a great question, and unfortunately, it's probably more common than people realize.
Okay, so we've got these really serious accusations from Adria Sheri English and Diddy denying everything, but then her own lawyer drops the case. It makes you wonder what's going on there, you know? What does it mean for her side of things?
Yeah, that's where things get kind of strange. The Daily Mail article says she wants damages, but then her lawyer backs out, citing conflicting instructions.
Yeah, okay.
Which, let's be real, that's lawyer speak for something's fishy. It could be that there are problems with English's story, or maybe she's not listening to her legal team.
That's got to hurt her credibility, right? Does that mean her case is done for?
It's definitely a setback. It'll be interesting to see if she gets a new lawyer and how this all plays out in court.
So we've heard English's side, but what about Diddy? Is he saying anything else besides denying it all?
Not really. The Daily Mail article mentions he's been pretty quiet on social media about all this, focusing more on his music and his businesses. But we know that staying silent can be interpreted a lot of ways, especially when it comes to public opinion.
This whole thing, it feels bigger than just some celebrity gossip. What do you think?
I totally agree. This case, it touches on some heavy stuff. Power, exploitation, consent, especially in music and entertainment.
Yeah, unfortunately, that whole casting couch thing, those power imbalances are something we hear about way too often.
It's a sad truth. But a lot of aspiring artists, dancers, really anyone trying to make it in that world, they're vulnerable. especially when you're dealing with people who have all the influence and power over your career.
And it takes a lot of guts to come forward with those kinds of accusations, especially against someone as big as Diddy with all his connections.
Absolutely. And we have to remember there are always two sides to every story. We've got to let the legal process happen, not jump to conclusions, and make sure both sides can present their case.
That makes sense, but how do you even prove something like this from so long ago?
You've hit on a huge issue here. We're talking about stuff that supposedly happened back in the early 2000s. If there's no hard evidence, it's just a case of he said, she said, and any witnesses, if there are any, their stories are going to be super important.
But even with witnesses, memories can be fuzzy. It seems like it'll come down to who the jury believes more.
Exactly. These cases show how important a fair trial is, making sure everyone has a chance to say their piece.
It's also kind of a reality check, you know? The glitz and glamour of being rich and famous, it hides a lot of darkness.
For sure. This situation forces us to face that. It makes you wonder what really goes on behind the scenes, especially with all that wealth, power, and fame.
It's like that saying, if these walls could talk.
Right. Imagine if those fancy Hamptons houses could tell us what happened. This whole thing would be even wilder.
So what happens now? The lawsuit's kind of up in the air, and then there are those other sex trafficking charges against Diddy. It doesn't sound like this is over.
Not at all. There's a lot going on here, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. Will more people come forward? What will Diddy's lawyers do about all this? Could this actually lead to criminal charges?
And we can't forget about what people are saying, you know? Public opinion can be just as powerful as a courtroom. No matter what happens legally, this could really damage his career.
Absolutely. Especially these days with social media, news travels so fast, and people make up their minds quickly. It'll be interesting to see how this all unfolds in the courts and in the public eye.
It's almost like we're watching two different things happen, right? The legal stuff in the courtrooms and then whatever everyone's saying online makes you think, how much will this actually affect Diddy's career, even if nothing happens legally?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, we've seen it before. Accusations go viral, and people are quick to judge. You know what I mean?
Totally. So much to think about. We've got these accusations, Diddy denying it all, lawyers involved, all these famous people, some of whom might get dragged into this even more. This whole thing makes you realize how important it is to, like, think for yourself, don't you think?
100%. Especially now. There's so much information coming at us from every direction. You got to look at stories like this carefully. Can't believe everything you read online, right?
Yep.
To look at who's saying it, try to see all sides, and most importantly, don't make up your mind until you know all the facts.
That's good advice for anything, not just this.
Exactly. It's like that for everything these days.
So for our listeners out there, anyone who's really dug into this with us, what's the takeaway here? What should they keep in mind as this goes on?
I think the big thing is be careful what you believe, right? Keep an eye on what happens with these cases against Diddy. Listen to the evidence, and don't just go with what you see in headlines or on social media. Remember, there's always more to the story.
Well said. We've got accusations flying, denials, legal battles, and a ton of unanswered questions. This deep dive has been pretty crazy, and it's not over yet. Thanks for joining us as we try to figure this all out.